Well, this is another of the Lerman sibling recordings for our YouTube station, South Bend Lermans. And I'm pleased today that my younger brother, just one younger, Mike Lerman, is going to tell us about growing up and his career. And welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Bob.
So we're going to get started. How you might recall, whether you do recall, what you felt like being in a family. You were the fifth child, so you had four older brothers. Then, of course, you had some younger siblings as well. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. First of all, can you hear me okay?
Sure.
I feel like God looked down and said, look, I think this guy needs some help. Let me see what I can do. So first of all, he put me in the fifth of the family. And so I had older brothers that I could look up to and learn from. But I thought it was a given that most people had big families. I didn't realize that they had smaller families, like 4 or 5 kids or something like that. And I always felt bad
Or one or two.
I always felt bad for them because that meant if a couple were away, it would be hard to have a ball game.
Yeah.
With us, there was always a ball game. My friends loved to come over. I remember one of the reasons I really liked it was when Dad would hit us ground balls and fly balls in the front yard. I was always able to play and learned a lot there. I learned there were a lot of high expectations, and each brother was so different. I learned from each one different aspects. So I was given every chance, parents and siblings, that would make me accountable and make me who I became, and was a large part of my success.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I was really blessed.
Well, those high expectations might have come from teachers and so on. Did you recall any of that?
I sure did. Teachers and coaches. The best classroom teacher I ever had in my life, and this covers elementary school, high school, college, and graduate school, was my 7th and 8th grade social studies teacher. His name was Ben Havel, Mr. Havel. And one of the things that he made us do, I remember, was all the boys had to memorize a poem. The one was called If by Rudyard Kipling. And I have it in my office right now. And I didn't like the assignment at the time because I wasn't that great at memorizing, but I loved what it was, and I loved the message of it. He was also the baseball and basketball coach. And at my height, I didn't have much chance of making the basketball team. I got cut in 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade. But in 7th grade, miraculously, I made the team. And I wasn't sure why, because Mr. Havel gave me a shot because he liked my intensity. I remember we were playing in the high school, I'm not high school, junior high school holiday tournament. It was a close game. And we went down this, and one of our best players fouled out. And I got in the game, and we went down the court, we shot, we missed. I got the rebound, and Mr. Havel called timeout, and he looked at the team. And he said, the shortest guy in the whole city got that rebound. Why don't you guys jump up? And he was a motivator. I remember one time we had a meeting. No, it was before we had basketball practice at 6:15 in the morning because we were the junior high school, and the elementary school had basketball practice after school. We had to go early. Well, one time we were supposed to get out of class about 15 minutes early. So for that, you had to have a pass. I mean, missing 10, 15 minutes of class, you couldn't just walk around like that. So he gave out these hall passes. And so he was asking every kid, who's your teacher? Who's your teacher? So because he was writing each one. And I remember one guy said, Martin, Meyer, Kubley going down. And he asked me, so I think I said, Mr. Goldberg or Mr. Golden or whatever it was. So he stopped right there. And he said, Lerman, you're the only one that use respect. You're the only one. You're an individualist. I respect that. And just, boy, just made me feel like whatever mom and dad honestly, I got paid back there. That was in elementary school. In high school, I was fortunate to follow you guys, and I heard about the debate team, and you guys told me about the debate team, and that's where I met Mr. Goodman, Charlie Goodman, and he was a real motivator, and taught us things that I never thought. Debating both sides of the topic. How do you, there's the right, if you're either right or you're wrong. And he taught us, about evidence and speaking. Just an amazing guy.
Yeah.
Made everybody be accountable. Then my wrestling coach, Coach Garty, who you had too, Bob.
Yeah.
And that was what motivated me. One of the things that motivated me was watching you in the holiday tournament wrestling match. I think you wrestled a guy from Washington. And I'll never forget how exciting that was. And my heart was just pounding. And I said, geez, I got to try that. I didn't know how much conditioning you
Did
had.
I win?
No, you didn't actually. But the way you competed, I remember that. And I remember Coach Garty walking out, and he was wearing a suit and tie. And he was barking out the directions. I felt like jumping out of the balcony and just going and working out right then. But I remember one time, so he would, after our freshman year, he did an evaluation, and he said, okay, let's go over it. Okay, Lerman, strength. All right, you're kind of in the middle. You're not particularly strong, but you've been working at it. That's pretty good. Speed. Well, it's not your strong point. But I think you can improve in that area. Technique. Well, you've picked up some good moves, but got a lot to go. You got a lot further to go. And we went on each one. I certainly wasn't given a high mark, and I was a little downcast. I walked away. I started walking away. He said, "Wait a minute, Lerman." I got another one. It's called guts. And by God, you got guts. And that's important to me. And so if you have guts, by God, you're going to wrestle. And I walked out of that room like 3 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
He was amazing.
Yeah, he was amazing. But so, well, while we're on wrestling, let's talk a little bit about your wrestling experience at Brandeis with Ted Reese.
Yeah.
Was Ted there, the coach?
Yeah,
right
he
at the
was there.
beginning?
Yeah. You had, I think, Manny Mayer.
Had Manny, and we had Charlie Smith too. But go ahead.
Okay, no. So I got there and I see this guy. I thought it was like Clark Kent and Superman. He was wearing glasses and a suit and tie. And then we got out of the match. He was this guy carved out of granite. And boy, was he a great leader and a great coach. And he
So at the beginning, how did you feel? And then as you developed, how did you
actually, I didn't feel so great in the beginning. I was playing flag football. Remember they had flag football?
Yeah.
And
fun. I played it.
Yeah, I hurt my ankle. And so I missed practice for a long time. And practice was really demanding.
Yeah.
So I can't say that it bothered me to miss practice. I was on a couple of weeks. All of a sudden, and I needed all the time I could get just to pass my classes. I'd be the first Lerman to flunk out of school. Anyway, so I'm in my room studying, and one of my friends on the floor says, "Lerman, there's a guy here to see you." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." "Who is it?" He said, "His name is Ted Reese." I said, "Really? Coach?" He came to my dorm room. He said, "Mike, I know you've been gone for a while, and I hope you're going to come back, because if you come back, because there wasn't a sports team at Brandeis that had a 500 record in, I don't know, 20 years, other than the women's fencing team. And so that was our goal. So Ted comes over and he says, yeah, we have a really good team this year with Neil Weiss, my friend Neil Weiss, and another guy. I forgot the other guy.
Ron Ratner.
No, that was a higher weight class. So the
Okay.
first 3 weight classes, we got winners.
Yeah.
Neil, so on and so. We'll start out with 3 wins. And frankly, Bob, that was the only time I can ever remember being called a winner in an athletic event. And so I got motivated, and I came back, and then he had me wrestling 130. Well, in high school, I wrestled 138, so I knew I had to pull a lot of weight, and it was tough. And I remember the night before the match, I had no energy left, and he said, Mike, if you go home, if you get within 2 pounds, you'll be okay. Just can't eat or drink anything. You just have to dry out, is what the term was. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, okay, fine. So I checked out of I weighed out 1 3/4 pounds over. And I went back to my room, and I was dying of thirst. And so I took an ice cube. I took another ice cube. And I took about 6 more ice cubes. Before I knew it, I thought maybe I was in violation. So I ran that night. I went down to the gym, weighed myself, and I was 2 pounds over. So I had to go into the steam room or into the sauna and put on my sweats and lose that weight. I came back, went to sleep. I couldn't sleep because I was just so dried out. But eventually I did, and got up, made weight barely, and wrestled this guy from Lowell State. I remember Lowell State was, and I pinned the guy. First time I ever remember being on top with a referee slamming the mat, and I could ever possibly remember. But he was good. I always tell you, I always tell people, I could tell you where every dirty light bulb was in every gym in South Bend, Indiana, because I was always on my back, it seemed like. But the coach taught me some things. I think you came to the match, Bob, but I think you missed my match. Came a few matches in. One of the best things about it was the sliced oranges that we could have after we wrestled. And we won that match, and had a pin, and boy, I was just top of the world. And it turns out that I don't remember my second match who we wrestled against, but it was the first 4 matches of the year I pinned my opponent. And then we wrestled a guy, wrestled a Tufts, Medford or someplace like that. And they had a good team, but I even beat that guy. I didn't pin him, but I beat the guy. And I think that was the last match we had before Christmas break or Hanukkah break. We went home, and I went to Riley, and they had a holiday tournament. And I saw Coach Garty. He says, "How you doing, Lerman? How you doing?" I said, "Coach, I'm 4-0. Can you believe it? 4-0." He said, "That's great." I said, "But Coach, they were all fish." That's what he used to refer to some of these. He said they weren't that tough. He said, "Lerman, if you beat them, they weren't fish." And but he was just huge.
Yeah. Yeah, he was quite a person.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to move along here. What other highlights were there in high school? You were on the debate team, you were on the wrestling team.
Well,
any other highlights? How did you feel you did in class?
I was sports editor. I was sports editor of the High Times.
Oh, okay. That's a tradition.
Yeah. We came in second in the state debate tournament, primarily because of my partner, who was excellent, Jim Fisher. We came in second. I couldn't believe it.
Wow, that's great.
But and I didn't make the National Honor Society. There weren't that many of us in the accelerated program that didn't do it. And one of my friends sarcastically said, "Yeah, but we were in the first round of being accepted into the National Dishonor Society."
Well, yeah, I
But
don't
you
want to
know,
tell you my story on that, but we won't we won't go into that. I didn't make it either.
so
So,
that was about it in high school, Bob. I mean, I
how
did
about now? Now you're thinking about going to college,
yes,
and you followed me into Brandeis.
yeah, yeah.
What
And
motivated you to think about Brandeis besides the fact that I'd gone and everything?
well, that was one of the major reasons. And because you went there, and the other part of it was I must fess up. I was very afraid. I didn't know that many Jewish kids, and I knew even fewer Jewish girls.
Yeah,
And those that I knew, I didn't like very much.
yeah,
So I didn't want. I was worried that I'd be the first one in our family to marry a shiksa. And I
mm,
was afraid what that would do to mom.
yeah,
I was trying to, what could I do? And I remember you said, look, go to Brandeis. The statistics are very good. There are that many Jews. So that was one of the reasons why. It was also the best school that I got into. Um, I remember not doing particularly well on the board scores,
yeah,
pretty depressed about it. And then I couldn't believe that I got in. You
yeah.
actually told me that you were talking to the admissions officer and you were trying to lobby for me. He said, well, the SAT scores aren't that good. He said, no, but he's a good guy. He said, oh, he's a good guy. He said, yeah, he's a really good guy. He says, all right, we'll take him. So that's how I got in.
Yeah. We
So
might
first
both
thing,
have trouble today, but anyway.
first thing I did was I looked to see, okay, well, I got in, but I don't want to be the first Lerman to flunk out. So I looked and they said that there were 500 kids in the class, and Brandeis has a very, very low dropout rate. I think it was like 5%. So well, I was nervous about that. Am I going to make that or not? So I met a guy there, Larry Shar. He was a younger brother of your friend Shifty
Yeah,
Shar,
yeah,
and we were both concerned about that. So we decided we'd break into, we would walk around during what do you call that week? What do you call it?
orientation.
Orientation, to try to see if we can find 20 people stupider than we were.
Right.
And we would meet at the end of the day and we'd go over it. Okay, I found three. This guy for sure. This guy's gone. And so we once we hit that threshold, it felt a little bit better. But I must say I was very frightened because first of all, I couldn't understand the accent that a lot of these professors had. Very heavy Boston accent. Uh, it was a big difference between college and high school for me. Most of these people had already had some these classes. I remember taking humanities with the Odyssey and the Iliad, the Iliad and the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Iliad and the Odyssey. Yeah.
I didn't know what they were talking about, and they were already discussing things in the content, and boy, I felt lost. But thank God, not to
But
mention,
you studied. You studied.
yeah, I studied hard, but even then, I remember calculus was a nightmare for me, and I think I gave you a lot of aggravation because you tried to tutor me in that. That's a lost cause. Uh, Everybody else took another science course, and you insisted that I take calculus, and so I didn't want to back. So I didn't,
Sorry.
and you came over, and I did pass barely, and then the second semester I took natural science or something. I don't remember what it was called, but it was. I remember walking in there and feeling embarrassed, looking around, and people would say, "What are you doing in here?" So I'm a refugee from calculus. But,
What
it was,
about some of the history or other courses
yeah,
where,
I had a guy named Ken Waltz,
yeah,
international politics. He was very good. Uh, but I was disappointed because I was there to learn the information and not take the information and start discussing it,
yeah,
analyzing it. So I felt like I was always a step behind or multiple steps behind. But eventually I got through it. There was a very good friend of mine, Ron Ratner, who was on the wrestling team. And Ron and his roommates, what they did for humanity was in the beginning of the semester, they would branch out and they would go to every class to see what courses were the gut courses, what were the easiest courses. And it would be like a clearinghouse. They say, I'm looking for an easy course on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, anytime after 9 o'clock in the morning. And they'd say, okay, I have this one, that one, so on and so forth. I remember taking a sociology class, one sociology class, and what a waste it was. But it was easy, so I didn't have to worry about it. One of the things, Bob, that happened at Brandeis, which it did involve you, you know, Brandeis had in one of the dining halls a kosher option.
Yeah.
And so the line, I remember the line, it was the same food except that they didn't mix milk with meat. And to separate it, you had these green trays, these bright green trays. And we were referred to affectionately or unaffectionately as the Green Tray Club. And I remember after practice, which was late, and the dining hall was still open, I got there. And a lot of guys on the wrestling team ate together because we all finished late. And I was sitting there, and I saw one of the guys on the team, a guy named Marty Fenster, guy from Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, oh, Marty, I never noticed you here. You eat on a green tray too. He said, yeah. I said, oh, that's interesting. Are you from a religious home? He said, no. But we kept kosher. And I remember coming to Brandeis, I wasn't sure whether I was going to eat kosher or not. And then, so I figured, okay, most of the guys are not, so I'll probably not have kosher. And then I saw Bob Lerman, and he was eating on a green tray. And I said, he said, Bob Lerman's a good guy, and he's a normal guy. If he's eating kosher, I can eat kosher too. So I'll never forget that. I was very proud.
Great. All right, so Mike, we're about half done. So let's and you're still only 20, 21 years old. So so you met Mimi at college. Tell us about that.
College. It was a great event for me, and I think it was because I did a mitzvah. And here's what happened. We were 10 of us living in a suite in the East.
Yeah, I remember the suites.
And one guy, Larry Shar, had a girlfriend that was always around, and she was a little tough to take, but she had a personality. And two guys got married and they moved away, and then so that would have been 8. And my roommate Al Shaken was one of the guys who was looking for a house, and he said, we found the house. My problem is there can only be 6 in the house. I said, oh boy, 8 of us. I said, how are you going to do that? He said, well, nobody wants Larry there because of, Penny's always around. But we figured, I said, well, that's 7. How'd you get down to 6? He said, well, we figured of all the people, you're the only guy who can really, because I really like Larry. I really enjoyed his humor and so forth. And you seem to have the biggest ability to not get upset with Penny. I said, yeah, I'm either at wrestling practice or I go to studying and library, and she doesn't bother me. So I said, so we figured you could live with Larry. Would you do that? I said, yeah, I'll live with Larry. Fine. So Penny was so kind, and she kept kosher, kept the apartment kosher. And one day she said, I didn't have much of a social life. And she said, one of the girls that I have a room right next door. I don't like the guy that she's going out with, and I don't think she really does. So would you go out with her? I said, sure. Who is it? Her name is Mimi Finch. So that's how I was the one, because I said, I'll live with Larry. And as a result, I was the next guy up, so to speak. And I remember I picked her up from, it was a good omen, because with wrestling, you have to lose a lot of weight. And so I start the season wearing what I call my fat pants. Then I get, the night before the match, you got skinny pants. And then in between is your middle-sized pants. So I just moved from my fat pants to my middle pants. I went to pick her up, and I see this really pretty girl with a beautiful smile. And she made a rib steak, I remember. I was starving. I figured, okay, this will great. This little gal, she's no way gonna finish her rib steak. I'll make a good impression, and then later I'll eat it. Like I'll eat her half, and I'll eat mine. I'll eat mine, and I'll eat her half. Well, she ate the whole thing,
Okay.
and we had a nice time. And normally I always try to space out the interesting things about myself so I can get a second date, use it on the second date or third date. And I realized I may not get a second date.
Yeah.
I used everything I could, and I did get a second date. It took a little while, but I did get that second date. And then,
Were you a senior then?
yeah, I was a senior. She was a junior.
Junior, yeah.
I had never met her before. I don't remember ever seeing her before. And I'll never forget, it was October 18th, 1968. It's one of the great dates of my life. And I think goes down like right next to Pearl Harbor Day and her family.
Mhm.
That was a great event, but I just,
Yeah.
then,
Very good.
and then I kept, we kept going out, and it became a little serious, and a lot serious. And so when I brought her home to South Bend, and I remember Mom was very concerned because I would share when I would come home from college, I'd visit with Aunt Sally and Aunt Lucy. And they all wanted to know how my social life was, so I told her about
Hmm.
it. And she said, "Yeah," I said, "She's very pretty, blonde, blue eyes. Her name is Mimi Finch from Boston. I'd like to bring her home, so I don't know if I will or not." So I said to Mom, "Mom, I have a friend I'd like to bring home." So she said, "Yeah, what kind of friend?" "It's a friend." "Yeah, tell me about this friend." I said, "Well, she's a very nice person." "Oh, it's a girl? You're telling me you're bringing home a girlfriend?" I said, "No. So she's a friend who happens to be a girl." And then finally she said, "What are you trying to tell me? You're bringing home a shiksa? Is that what you're telling me?" "No, Mom, she's Jewish." So she said, "Then what's the problem? So bring her home. Bring her home." So I picked her up in Chicago. First, we stayed at Uncle Jake's house. And I think Uncle Jake really liked her, and I think gave Mom a heads up. This is a great girl. So I got home, and Mom spent some time with her. And then she called me into her room, and she never did that unless she was really mad at me. I didn't do anything wrong. So she called me and she says, "I really like this girl." She said, "You better not lose this girl or I'll beat the hell out of you. At least save her for Jerry." Because remember, nobody had gotten married for a while, and you were not on the marriage track there, Bob.
Right.
So that was it. That was it. And then every time I called home, that Mom and Dad would answer the phone. So new.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then so October 68, then December of 69, we went to Mimi's parents' house, and I asked, like we said, we'd like to get married. And I remember the different reaction, because it was June 28th. It's the date. We didn't get married that date, but that was the date we figured out. And I remember Mimi's mother said, "What's the rush? What's the rush?"
Hmm.
I called home and I told them, and they were very, very happy. And they said, it took you long enough to find out." But she was
Yeah.
just,
Harold and
yeah,
was her father, right?
yeah, yeah. And then I remember he called up his sister, Aunt Kate and Aunt Frances, and he said, "Guess what? Mim's getting married. And you know what? The wedding's going to be kosher. It's going to be kosher. The wedding's going to be kosher." Isn't that funny? And of course, he was a fine, very fine man.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I see a lot of him in Mimi. His kindness, his sensitivity. Can I share one little? It's not a little. It's a little, yeah, example
Go ahead.
about this. And I was in shul, and this was the day after Simchas Torah, and it's beautiful, Bob. You should have seen. All the things we never saw as kids in the old shul, we're seeing now. Got all these kids dancing and singing and just telling about the Torah, and so on and so forth, and just nonstop. And so there was this old question. Okay, listen, we got the Torah on Shavuos. We didn't. Why do we wait till Simchas Torah? No, months later. to do all the dancing and show the appreciation and the love for what God did for us. And the example was given is, and I was thinking about this. Look, when I got married to Mimi, I thought, okay, that's one of the greatest nights, one of the great things. But it wasn't until now we've been married 54 years that I can really see how wonderful it was. And he says, that's the same thing. But we got the Torah on Shavuos, but we couldn't experience all the greatness. It took us some time to see what was in the Torah, and
Mhm.
and to be able to celebrate that. Once you really know that, then that's really a cause for celebration.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is with her. She just keeps getting better and better. And what she's done for me, I mean, first of all, she saved my life when I had the stroke, and how she reacted and responded. And then things like visiting, and she just has this. We were at the hospital visiting a friend, and then we stopped up on the 6th floor, which was the rehab floor, and the nurses were very kind, and they said, "Mike, how are you doing?" I said, "Fine." And then I said, "You remember my trophy wife here?" And they said, "We remember Mimi. Oh, we all remember Mimi." And all these little stories that are just incredible. So
Mike, let's go toward your first job. And well, before that, I guess you decided to go to grad school in education. How did that come about?
well, if you remember, Bob, during the Vietnam War,
Yeah.
they had the draft lottery.
Yeah, Mike, can you just look up a little? Yeah.
We had the draft lottery. My number was 2,
Okay.
and there were programs where there were deferments given, and one of which was teaching in an inner city school. And this program that Brown was offering was a Master of Arts in Teaching with a focus on inner city schools. And also, it was only 30 minutes away from Mimi, and I didn't want to go too far away from her. So it worked out. I got accepted, and I think I got accepted in part for reverse affirmative action. They needed men,
Yeah.
and the guy liked my background. It was from a comprehensive public school, and Coach Reese, Ted Reese, told me that I should really consider teaching and coaching. I was the captain of the team, and he felt I had the leadership skills to do that. And some of the people that I really looked up to were teachers, Mr. Havel and Mr. Goodman, and then the coaches. So I applied, and Dad tried to get me into Notre Dame, and I didn't want to go there, being too far
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
But so the Brown program was a good fit, and I had some very good professors there, and they had me in the summertime. They had us give model lessons, and I remember there was a girl from Whittier College, and she basically just fell apart because these kids were, they were decent kids. These weren't troubled kids, but she just couldn't handle younger kids, and we had younger siblings, and we always were able to relate to those kids, and so, not that I did that great, but compared to everybody else, I looked terrific, and so they gave me a fellowship, and which meant that I didn't have to pay the ridiculous tuition at Brown, and so I took the classes, and I figured this is good. I'll save the world, and figured cut maybe 2 years to save the world, then I can go on with my life.
Yeah.
But I didn't. So then we were like, we graduated. Mimi graduated college. I graduated graduate school, and it's time to get a job. So I was interviewed, and this man at Brown, his name is Lou Simonini, really was very well connected. He helped me get hired. Social studies teachers were a dime a dozen. Mimi had a bachelor's degree in chemistry. And she was hired by a Catholic school in about 15 minutes.
Mm.
It took me weeks and weeks and weeks till I got my job. Mimi's salary was $5,000 a year. My base salary was $6,000, but I got 600 for coaching and 500 for the graduate degree. I always told Mimi, see, wrestling got me more money than the masters. And I taught school. And the first day of school, I was pretty nervous.
What class were you teaching?
Social studies. They said basically teach them whatever you could teach them.
Yeah.
And what was disheartening was the attendance was so atrocious that you never had any chance to have some continuity. And the best class I had was the vocational kids. They were the ones that were most responsible. And it's a very strong Italian group. And first day of class, first day I went to school, there was a teacher out in the parking lot told me that students were not allowed to park in the teacher's parking lot. I said, I'm a teacher. And I was wearing a suit. And he said, okay, fine. So I got in there. Well, I was pretty nervous and I locked my car, but I locked my keys in the car. I couldn't get the keys. So I mentioned something to the social studies director. I said, do I call? I better get a hold of AAA. He said, no, don't worry about that. And so some kids heard that. Mr. Lerman, what's the problem? I said, I got to get, don't worry about that. What kind of car? We'll come out with you. We can break into your car. And they did. At lunchtime, they came, they broke into it, got me the keys. Everything was okay. And I was a little bit unusual for a teacher for these guys. I was the only Jew that they had. And short.
What kind of, do you remember any kind of topics that you like to teach about?
Well, I taught Western civilization. One of the things that was a bit controversial, and I remember this, during the Crusades, I remember walking to shul with Dave, and I was talking about the Crusades and all the good things. And he said, you know how many Jews they killed? And he went on and on. So I learned about that. So I gave them an alternative view of the Crusades. This didn't play well since it's a very large Catholic community there. But I remember teaching kids about, Reconstruction. And then later we got into world history and talked about, they didn't have anything in the history books on it, but I found some stuff on the Holocaust. And I remember I was reading and I got pretty shook up about it. I was pretty ticked off after class. 3, 4 of these guys said, Mr. Lerman, what are you so upset about? This happened. Look, we're all Italians. You think we care what happened in Italy? We don't care. What are you worried about? You're in the United States. I'll never forget that. They didn't mean any harm by it. Give me their opinion. And I told them some of the things that the Nazis had done and the brutality. They said, we don't believe you. We don't believe you. So that's true. And
so now you've been teaching for a bit. You taught what, 2 years there?
Yeah, 3 years actually.
3 years?
Yeah.
And I mean, would you have left if Dad hadn't asked you to come? Or what would you probably continue teaching? Or
good question. I think I would have left. I was disillusioned because the best teachers wanted to get out of the classroom. They wanted to get into administration. That was what they were gaining. And I remember I had some guilt feelings about leaving. And I didn't want to say anything. And then I did say something to a couple of people. They said, what are you worried about? I said, well, I feel like I'm leaving. It's not right. He said, what are you talking about? If we had that opportunity, we'd go in a second. You're an idiot for not going. As a matter of fact, the person that I really owe the most to was Mimi's great uncle. He was probably in his 90s, and Dad and Mom came out to meet their family, and he loved Dad. He just loved it. And this guy turned out he was a steel buyer for a garage company and garage door company. And he was telling me, Mike, you got such a great opportunity. You should really consider it. We hate to see Mimi leave. At that time, we had a baby. We had Sarah, and she was the first one born in that family in a long time. And Mimi being the only daughter and really one of the favorites. But he said, you gotta, I said, well, really, Uncle, forgot his forgot his name. Uncle Henry, maybe, I can't remember. I said, one of the things I don't like is I don't drink. I hate drinking. And my dad wants me to go into sales. And I know if you go into sales, you got to drink. He said, Mike, I've hosted all kinds of events, and you take a glass of ginger ale and they don't know if it's schnapps or if it's pop. Or he didn't say pop. So just don't worry about that. And he was right, turns out. But I remember going with Sam and Rube, going to lunch with a customer, and they said, well, if the customer orders a drink, you have to order a drink too. It made me sick. I couldn't stand it. But anyway, that was that really gave
So
me
dad
different perspective.
persuaded you and you decided to come to South Bend.
Yeah, Dad, I talked to Dad. This was one of the things that the most successful teaching sections I had was in Industrial Revolution with labor unions. This was during the time there was a strike at Steel Warehouse.
Yeah.
And I talked to Dad almost every day. And I would relate the events of the day to the kids. And they were, what happened, Mr. Lerman? What happened yesterday? What happened? And so they really were into it. Excuse me. So they were very, and I talked to Dad about, about how volume was. And I heard some stories. One story was there was a gal, an immigrant lady, Italian lady, who was to help her family. She was cleaned off, and Dad had her working over at Steel Warehouse, and she's very loyal, very hardworking, but she was very afraid. And she said, she said, Mr. Lerman, I'll come to work, but I hope it's safe for me. He said, yeah, they're not going to do anything. So she came into his office one night, bawling. She went out to get to her car, and all of her tires were slashed. So Dad was furious. Dad said, get in my car. We're going to go get some new tires. So he got in the car and he drove over to the pickle line. The picket line, and started yelling at these guys. So this is what you guys do? You pick on this lady, you slice her cars, you slash her tires. She had nothing to do with it. She's cleaning the office. This is what she's trying to make money to feed her family, and this is what you guys do? You should be ashamed of yourself. He went out and got tires, got them put on her car, and she was left alone the whole time. And it was a great story. But I often wonder, like Rabbi Wein says, all my stories are true, just some of them haven't happened yet.
Yeah.
So one year, that was at what, 1970. So probably in the 90s, there was a guy who was a president of the union who I knew, and I was friendly, and I was out in the plant. He said, Mike, how you doing? I'm fine. I said, well, pretty good. My mom just lost a sister, though. What do you mean? I said, well, her sister died. It was really sad. As a matter of fact, let me tell you, she actually worked for your father. She cleaned offices. And one time she had her tire slashed, and your father went out and got her 4 new tires. I felt so good hearing that story.
To know that it was true.
Yeah. But I'd hear these stories from Dad, and I'd get really motivated, but I still didn't know what the heck I was going to do. I think the only thing I was really prepared to do was to work to stack steel behind the shear.
Yeah.
But Dad said, no, I want you to get into sales. Well, there really wasn't anything there, but Dad and Dave were running the place, and he had me do credit and collection. Do you remember Frank Vogler?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, not a fan, not a fan.
Yeah.
Well, he was retiring, so Dad said, okay, my new credit man. I'd never heard of Dun & Bradstreet or anything like that. But I remember going with Dad to the steel mills, and Dad was, this is our new credit man. Oh, the money man. Yeah, we want to be on Mike's good side. So one guy said, yeah, I remember Steel Warehouse. There's a guy there, Herman Siegel.
Mm.
He said, let me tell you something. When a credit man remembers your name, that's not a good sign. And I said, well, he's gone. My dad bought him out, and so on and so forth. And that was what I was in charge of claims as well. So it was not a very exciting or not a very interesting time for me, and I was very, very disillusioned. At least at the high school where I taught, I'd go home, I would be exhausted, I'd be sweating.
Yeah.
I'd go home, and I remember telling me I'm never going to learn this business. Well, bad news was when Dad passed away suddenly. We had made a decision to go into Milwaukee, and primarily because of American Motors. And Mom told me that Dad came home one day and said, "I got great news." I said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, I think Brookshire's gonna come to work for us." Jack Brookshire was the director of purchases, and everybody loved him. He was very, very popular in Wisconsin, and a number of people. American Motors had a policy how many years and out. And he started when he was about 19, and
Yeah.
so everybody wanted, but he decided to come to work for us. Dad was just so elated, and he was going to help Jim run Wisconsin, and he did a great job as a mentor there. But after Dad died, of course, that changed everything. Just Dave.
Well, Jim came before Dad died.
Yeah, Jim came in 73.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it was 2 years.
Yeah. So Dave said, I want you to start to take on some sales responsibility. So who was the sales guy? The best sales guy was Rube, our uncle.
Yeah.
And I remember telling Dad, "I can't make it in sales." He says, "What are you talking about? You can do it." I said, "Dad, I don't know," because it was like a different language, all the terms and so forth.
Yeah.
He said, "Look, you've worked with Sam and Rube. You think they're pretty good?" I said, "Yeah, they're very good." He said, "They are very good, but they're not exactly Rhodes Scholars. If they can make it, you can make it." And so I got involved, and we were starting a new territory out in Iowa. We had a salesman who lived in Rock Island, or not in Rock Island, but in that area. And he took me out there, he introduced me, and he felt it was a great attribute or great benefit for him to have the son of one of the owners in that territory. So we got to call on a lot of people, and I learned some stuff. And
Yeah. How did you learn about the different types of steel and who did what and different types of customers?
well, first of all, I made a lot of mistakes, and I'd get embarrassed, and so I wanted to learn from those things. And then I just worked crazy, like as much as I could to learn about them. We had a variety of sales guys, from these guys who are just good traditional soldier type, to these guys like Sid Vellin. Do you remember Sid Vellin?
Yeah.
He was a character from Chicago.
Yeah.
And
And did Rube or Sam give you
yes,
any mentoring or?
Sam did for a while, and then I could see that there were certain things lacking there. Rube never really acknowledged me. When I told Dave I wanted to have sales meetings, I said, "Fine." And Rube told me, he says, "I'm not going to your sales meeting. I don't get anything out of it. What am I going to learn from you guys?" So I said, "Okay, fine." Well, we had these meetings, and we had speakers. We did some interesting things. One day, Rube gets mad at me, closes the door, and says, "How come you didn't tell me about the sales meeting?" I said, "Rube, you don't need my sales meeting." He said, "No, I want to go." So he'd come, and never forget one time. Said, "Okay, tell me a success story." Every salesman told us success. So I figured they could learn by this guy's what he's done. So Rube didn't want to do it. So finally, Rube said, "Okay, I have one." He said, "There's a customer of ours. We still have this customer. It's now one of our biggest customers." He said, we couldn't get a price increase. So Siegel told me, "Look, we either get a price increase, or we're going to just fake the weights. We're going to just make the weights higher," which was stealing, basically.
Yeah.
And so everything was going okay until they caught him. And then they confronted us and summarily threw us out. And that was a few years before Dad bought out Siegel. Well, I guess, things were tough, and we wanted to get any business we could. And Dad said, "Go on back to General Sheet." And Rube said, "Not gonna, Nate, don't you remember?" I said, "Yeah, I know. Just go on back anyway." So he goes in there. knocks on the door, and the receptionist says, "Hi, Rube Gould from Steel Warehouse. I want to see Mr. Axelberg." And so the receptionist knew about it. "Oh, Mr. Gould, I don't think he's going to want to see you. Just ask him." So she calls back, and he comes storming up. And he says, "What are you doing here? You're a thief. Get the hell out of here." He throws him out. And Rube, as you know, was very, very witty.
Yeah.
So he comes back a month later. And so there's reception, "Mr. Gould, are you sure?" Yeah. Let's try it again. So the guy comes out and he starts yelling at Rube, and Rube starts talking to him a little bit, and he calms down. Finally, he throws him out. This goes on for maybe 6 months or a year. And the guy says to Rube finally, "Rube, you're a good guy, and I enjoy talking to you, but I'm not ever going to buy from you. And I own the company. Why do you keep coming back?" He said, "Yeah, you're right. You own the company, but I'm making a lot of friends here, and I'm going to bet that you're going to die before me. And when you do, I'm going to be here to get that business." And then Rube said, and he did. He did die, and Rube was there and knew all these people. And today they're one of our best customers.
Wow.
Franchise relationship. And then Rube started coming to the meetings, but he would help me. He would go to. I remember going to a steel service, like a conference, and a guy comes over to me, and he says, "You're Mike Lerman from Steel Warehouse?" I said, "Yeah." So he grabbed my hand and he shook my hand. He said, I gotta tell you a story. I started buying steel. I forgot the name of the company. They were in Culver, Indiana, I think. So excuse me. So he said, "I didn't know anything about steel. Rube Gould came to see me, and we were talking, and it was obvious I didn't know anything. Finally, he took his notebook, he put it down my desk. He said, "You want me to teach you about steel? You want me to teach you? I'll teach you about steel, but you got to only buy from me." I said, "Yeah, sure." He slammed the door, and he taught me. He said he gave me a tutoring. He tutored me every time, and as a result, I learned about it. Now I'm the president of a company, primarily because of what Rube taught me.
Hmm.
Uh,
Very nice.
yeah, it was.
Okay, Mike, I have one more big question. We're almost at the hour point, and I like to keep it to
Sure.
around an hour. It can go out, can go more, but and that is about sort of your religious transformation.
Sure.
You grew up. We were, well, let's say, not totally observant Orthodox Jews.
No.
Caught the ball game here and there.
Oh yeah.
And did some other things, but we by today's standard, we did quite a bit, but we weren't Shomer Shabbat. And how did it change for you?
Well, there are a number of signposts along the way, but one of them was, I remember as a kid, being kind of depressed. You were there, Bob, but there was nobody there at the shul except for
Yeah,
really old people and a few of us, and we'd have those long walks.
yeah,
And but I always had great respect for Al, and I had total disrespect for people who were anti-religious.
yeah.
And I remember wrestling against Yeshiva University, and you actually told me, Bob, don't ever talk to your opponent before you wrestle a guy from Yeshiva University. I said, okay, because I said, but why? He said, because they're all nice guys. They're Yeshiva guys. You're going to like the guy, and you're not going to want to beat him. Just nice guys. And I remember going there, and I beat my opponent, and I remember Al came with little kids. He came. He missed my match, but he came. And I said to my opponent, I said, "Oh, geez, does anybody have a yarmulke? That's for yarmulke they could let me use for a while." So I said, "Really? Why do you want a yarmulke?" I said, for respect for my brother. He's over there. So they saw this guy with a hat and a beard and little kids running around wearing a suit. Said, "That's your brother?" I said, "Yeah." So he said, "I don't have one. Let me go." So he asked a couple of guys, "Anybody have a yarmulke?" They said, "For who?" "This guy's brother. This guy went to Brandeis and that's his brother." And I remember being there and just enjoying what their family was. And so Mimi was from a home that was not
Yeah,
observant of anything.
right.
So
Reform.
she was kind of looking at me to kind of lead the way. And I said, "Well, we got to have a kosher home." I said, "Okay." Well, and we went to Al and Nama's for Shabbos, and I remember how beautiful it was and how Mimi enjoyed it so much. We just weren't ready for it. I wouldn't call myself a real knowledgeable Jew. I knew some things. Then in I don't remember the year, maybe 72 or 73, we decided, actually, Dad thought it was a good idea to start to see if we could have a day school in South Bend.
Yeah,
So I said, yeah, I think that makes sense because otherwise our kids, I mean, I could see every generation knew less and less.
yeah,
And I knew what the public schools were like.
yeah,
And so Dad brought me in his office. He says, "Look, I want you to work on this. This is your main responsibility." I said, "More important than credit and collection?" He said, "Yeah, this is the most important thing." So we had committees and we met with people. We had somebody from New York, the National Association of Day Schools, Torah Masora, would come and he'd talk to us. And very, very inspiring people, and told us what it was like. And I was hoping that we could get, a minimum of 5 kids in a class. And so we decided, well, the only thing we can get was kindergarten and a pre-kindergarten. And we actually had 13 kids signed up. So Dad kept saying, "Well, what's going on?" I said, "Well, Dad, we can't get anybody until we know we have teachers." "Okay, so why don't you continue?" "Well, you can't. We don't have enough money to pay the teachers. And I don't want to hire, I don't want to have, I know how Al didn't get paid when he was teaching. He says, "What do you need to pay the teacher? What do you need?" I said, "Well, we raised this." I said, "What are you short? What are you short?" I said, "Okay, we're short $10,000. And that was a lot of money back then. I said, 10,000, that's what you're short? You got it. Go get those kids signed up and hire the teachers." I said, "You mean?" He said, "Yeah, I'll cover that. Don't worry about it." So we did. And that's how we started. And next year, we added a 3-year-old nursery. So we had a 3-year-old, 4-year-old nursery, and we had a kindergarten. And so we were trying to figure, okay, so where are we going to put it? So, it's funny, nobody wanted to support it, but all the synagogues wanted it in their location because they thought that would help get the members.
right.
So we couldn't, there was too much of a political football. Well, there was one girl in town, one family had moved to town, a religious family, and she was not sent to public school. She was sent to St. Mary's Academy.
Mm,
And she was a very, very fine student. Everybody loved her. And they had they had a lay principal there. His name was Paul Degnan. I remember he was a short guy. And she said, "Boy, I wish I could find an answer. What's wrong? What's the problem?" I said, "Well, I'm starting a Jewish school." "Yeah." And they didn't know where to go. So there was a fight about it. So he said, "Well, what if we offered some space? Catholic school." So she said, "Oh, that would be great." So they offered us some space. I had some people from Chicago who had been in running a school down to look at it to see from a school standpoint, does it look like it's sufficient? They said yes. And so we were all set to start there. And with about a week left for school to start, the fire department came and said, "No, you can't do it here. It's not safe." So we were thrown a curveball. And anyway, so this guy, Paul Degnan, felt really bad. He said, "Don't worry, I got some space over at St. Joe High School." I said, "No, that's not going to work." So he took us around his place and he said, "Okay, well," and then we had an Israeli lady who was just a very dynamic woman, and she was going to be our teacher. And so he said, "Okay, we can go to the nuns' retirement home. There's the basement's completely open." And so the average age there was about 85. I could just see this with little Jewish kids running around with the nuns, and they didn't think that was going to work. So he said, "Is there anything else?" I said, "Well, yeah, we have the old stables of the Erskine estate, and that's where they used that. They had a maintenance. They had the maintenance there, so we go over there." And so she says, "You know, this could be okay if you could move the tractor, we could paint the walls." And she was used to making something out of nothing. And so he said, "Yeah." They charged us $130 a month, and we fixed it all up. And we had 3 classrooms, and that's how we started.
Hmm.
And
But Mike, I want to get back to you personally.
so I saw this as a result. We learned things that I never knew before, and saw the kids learning things, and I remember it was Simchas Torah. I said, "Sarah, you're going to dance with me in Simchas Torah?" And she looked at me and she said, "Dad, girls dance with girls and boys dance with boys." We used to call her Fruma Sarah. And she was learning all this stuff. And in 1973, I think it was, or 74, no, it was after Dad died, so it had to be after 75.
Yeah.
The seed program, which so they sent guys from a yeshiva.
Yeah.
And they came to South Bend, and they were learning at night, and I would go because I felt embarrassed that there was nobody there. So I would go almost every night. I got to be very good friends with them. And I was learning more and more, and Mimi was learning with the ladies. And I remember it was a Friday, and because the davening was later, so we ate, and then I went to shul. And then that night, I said, "Okay, we're gonna watch." There was a Woody Allen movie that I always loved. Woody Allen. So
Yeah.
I was gonna walk home. I was gonna walk home, and then I was gonna watch the movie. So I got there, and it turns out that there were a lot of kids there from the B'nai B'rith Youth Organization, because Jay got mad at them and said that you guys never do anything religious. All you guys do is partying. So they didn't want Jay to be mad at them, so they came. And but they came late, and so they missed the davening. So they said, "Okay, we'll stay." So these guys from the seed program invited them to stay, and I saw how they interacted with these kids, and they made them feel good. And I said, "Boy, that's unbelievable." I walked home after that, and I said, "You know what, Mimi, I just can't watch TV on Shabbos. I just can't do it. I feel bad because I didn't want to leave her alone." So that was it. And I kept Shabbos at Shabbos, and it wasn't so bad. Well, the following week, Notre Dame's opening game was against Pittsburgh. Tony Dorsett was playing for Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Okay, well, look, I'll put it on the Shabbos clock. I'll put the game on the Shabbos clock, and then at the time of the game, I'll go in our room and I'll watch the game." And Notre Dame got slaughtered that game. I felt bad. I said, "Look, if I'm in violation of the spirit of Shabbos, I don't want that to hurt Notre Dame." So I stopped watching the games. And then
Well,
Jim had a question answered by Rabbi Tursky that if you buy a VCR, and if you set up before Shabbos and you don't touch it during Shabbos, you can watch the game afterwards. It's not.
yeah.
So Jim bought me a VCR. He bought these tapes. You know what these tapes cost? Blank tapes cost about $20. So
Yeah.
I would tape it. I'd watch it Saturday night or Sunday, and then I'd find a truck going up to Wisconsin on Sunday night. I'd bring it out to the office, and they'd bring this up to Jim, and then he'd watch it, and then he'd send it back.
Wow.
But it got me thinking that that's really what I want to do, and I talked about it, and Mimi was very open to it, and she saw that,
Yeah. I had kind of thought that maybe during the year of going to shul
yeah,
on Dad's behalf, that might have been a factor.
It was, but it started before that, and I could see the benefits of it right away. And these guys learned, and then our first principal at the day school, a guy named Moshe Toiv, I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, of
He's
course.
a very, very outgoing guy. Every Shabbos meal we ate together, and he was great with kids. I just felt more and more comfortable doing more and more things. And then gradually, remember one year we went to Israel and I came back. I started thinking, you know what? I'm going to put on a yarmulke. So what I did was I waited the whole day, and then at 5 o'clock when everybody left, because I didn't want them to think I was pulling rank, I
Mhm.
put on the yarmulke after. And then I realized one day, you know what? Oh, I know what happened. I saw a guy who worked at Inland Steel, and he always wore a yarmulke. Matter of fact, he was the manager of the wrestling team when we wrestled against Yeshiva University. Yeah, Neil Lerman was the reps. And
Yeah, well, there's all,
so it was as I was learning more and more, and these things made sense. And
so yeah, you know, in Israel you have the knitted kippah
yeah.
versus the kind you're wearing. But anyway, well, Mike, this
I
has
got a
been
big
very,
head.
very good. I'm so delighted you were able to take the time, and we'll follow up for more memories in the future. But for now, I think been going for an hour and 10 minutes or so, and I think people we want to respect the people who will watch it.
Yeah, I understand. I just want to tell you one quick story about
Sure.
um about these stories. Mimi was visiting her parents. This was a number of years ago, and we would always eat our Shabbos meal at Neil. And it was late, and I was sitting at the table, and they said, "Tell us some stories when Zadie was young." So I told them some stories about Dad, and they loved the stories. And every Shabbos after that, they would say, "Tell us more Zadie stories. Tell us stories when Zadie was." Then they'd say, "All right, tell us a Jerry story. Tell us a Bob story. Tell us," and I would tell or a Sally story, something like that. And of course, the Vodnoy story got lots of interest. But Naomi's kids are all different. They're all terrific. And I started telling one story. And Leah Bracha, the oldest, summarily got up and said, "Heard it," and walked out. But they all love the stories, and I think it's important. I try to encourage people to write things down. You told me that. Write everything down. Write it down. And
Yeah,
there's just so many
very good.
things.
Well, those yeah, my reflections on Dad, I think they're going to come out in the next LFN. So
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
okay, Mike, thanks a
All
lot.
right,
I'm going to
Bob.
stop the
Later, I'll tell you
recording.
another story about Dad that I think you'd really like. But I think
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, it was 1974, and there was a huge steel demand that year,
Yeah,
and the mills were shipping us short. We couldn't get enough steel of this one particular type. It's cold roll bright, and all of a sudden, Dad gets a phone call from a Japanese company, and the guy says, "Yeah, what do you need, Nate?" And he told him, and so the guy says, "Okay, I can take care of you." So I found out what had happened. The backstory was this. In the 60s, when the mills were not, they looked at service centers as dirty, rotten middlemen.
yeah,
Uh, as a result, a lot of service centers went to Japan to buy steel.
yeah,
Steel was very good. And so they'd go on these various trips. And I remember Dad and Mom went to Japan.
yeah. I remember.
And well, everybody would go and they'd be treated very, very well. They'd send a driver and so on and so forth. And the driver had his function. And so, unlike all the other people, Dad spoke to this driver rather than just looking at him as an employee or a servant. Started talking to the guy about his family. And Dad, you remember he opened up his wallet and showed all the pictures, and he'd
Yeah,
well, tell me about your family. And he'd talk to them, and every day Dad would ask him stuff. Well, that man became the president of Sumitomo Shoji America. And so he called Dad. I remember Dad said, "Who's on the phone?" Said, "Hiroshi Matsushita." "Hiroshi Matsushita, my friend?" And he grabbed the phone, and they were talking, and they were schmoozing, and that was a lesson. That was a lesson. I'll never forget it. How he,
Yeah, he was great with
with respect,
everybody.
and people
So
never.
that when you needed steel, they came through.
Oh yeah, he can't. How did he know that? He didn't know that, but he knew that he was a person,
Yeah,
just like that cleaning lady.
yeah,
Great
stories.
Yeah, yeah, great stories.
Okay, Mike,
All right,
we'll
Bob,
wrap it
thanks a
up.
lot. Be well, Bob. And
Thanks
remember, you
again.
had a
And
big say. You had a big influence in whatever success I achieved.
oh,
Me
small.
included.
You did it. Thanks again, Mike.
My pleasure. Sei gesund.
I'm gonna
Okay, I think I know how to get out of here.
here just a minute. Yeah, stop recording. Stop.